Hi guys, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this week's video. If you're new here, my name is Lisa and I'm a freelancer in Cornwall, and if you're not new here, then welcome back. If you've clicked on this video, chances are you're thinking about going on your first ever solo trip. If that's the case, you are definitely in the right place. In this video, I wanted to share my personal experience with booking a solo interrail trip around Europe. I'll be covering everything from the planning stages to being safe when you're traveling as a female, to backpacking, hostels, the financials, everything will be covered in this video. If you are thinking about taking that leap and booking your first ever solo trip, or you're just looking for some travel tips and recommendations, it's all going to be in this video, and by the end of this video, hopefully you'll be feeling really confident in booking that first ever solo trip. So before I crack into all of the logistical stuff, I thought it would be good just to share my story and my personal experience with solo travel. So I am currently 30 years old, I live in Cornwall in the UK, and I only went on my first ever solo trip when I was 29. So it was about a year and a half ago now. And up until that point, I've been on lots of holidays. I always loved travel, but I felt like I always had to have someone else to go with. When I was 29, I made a few big decisions in my life that really left me in a bit of a limbo and a bit of a crossroads. The reason I decided to go solo traveling at age 29 was kind of a build-up of a few different things. I've been working in a corporate job in London for the past few years. I was starting to feel really burnt out. I was working my full-time social media manager 9 to 5, but on the side I was also doing a little bit of freelancing because deep down I knew that I always wanted to start my own freelancing business eventually. Whilst working two jobs was definitely very draining, what it did give me was a bit of financial freedom because I had managed to save all of my side hustle money into a pot, which I then decided to use to go solo traveling. I'd always known that I wanted to take some time out of my career and full-time work to do some traveling. I didn't know what that was going to look like at the time, but I always thought that you would have to kind of have someone to go with. It was at this point that I decided it was kind of now or never, and I was done with waiting around for someone to go with me on this trip. And I started researching solo travel, following creators that were doing solo trips, researching places that I could go and feel safe as a female. I ended up quitting my corporate job and using my savings to take 6 months off and go solo traveling. Now I appreciate that that is quite a privileged position to be in, that not everyone would have the opportunity to take that much time off work with no responsibilities. But at this point in my life, I was single, I didn't have any other real responsibilities, I was renting in London, and I was able to move back home to my parents to leave my stuff in their house so I didn't have to pay for any storage. And I had that kind of golden window between quitting my corporate job and starting my business, where I knew I needed a bit of downtime to just travel and find myself again, as cheesy as that sounds. And yeah, I just took it. I decided that life's too short and I wasn't going to let the fact that I didn't have a partner or a friend to go with stop me from doing the things that I wanted to do and seeing the things that I wanted to see. So as scary as it was, this was actually a very pivotal point in my life, and I will always look back on it as one of the best decisions I've ever made in my entire life. So not to be dramatic here, but if you are thinking about this, I would say that you need to make sure you have a plan in place financially and logistically, but please don't let the fear stop you or the worry about what other people might think stop you. We'll come onto that more in detail later on in this video. I will always be an advocate for doing things on your own when there's not someone else to go with you and not letting that fear stop you. As I said at the beginning of this video, I am from the UK, so I decided, because this was my first ever solo trip, that I didn't literally want to go to the other side of the world because I just felt like I needed to dip my toe in and be fairly close to home. So I decided to interrail around Europe. For anyone who doesn't know what that means, it's basically using the train lines in Europe to travel from country to country. It's so easy to get around Europe via train, and I had a few friends that had done this before. So for me, I felt like this was still a huge risk and a big scary adventure, but also I felt close enough to home that, you know, if there was an emergency, I could be on a flight and home within a few hours. There are lots of different interrail passes. The one that I purchased was the one that you could have unlimited travel between the dates that you chose, so you could get on as many trains as you needed. I believe that there are other passes where you have a certain amount of trains that you're allowed to catch, so that would really be useful if you are really planned ahead and you know exactly which countries, which cities you want to go to, and you can make sure that you can get back to the place that you need to be by the end of the trip. I used the one that was kind of unlimited. I wanted that freedom. I didn't want to feel too in a routine, and that's just personal choice. But yeah, there's not for me to say that that was a better solution than the other ticket. I guess it comes down to budget too, because the more flexible your ticket is, it tends to be a bit more expensive the more flexible you go. There's no right or wrong route to take when you are traveling, but this was my route that I took. So I flew from London to Dubrovnik in Croatia, and that's kind of where I would say my trip started. So I stayed in an Airbnb for one night in Dubrovnik when I arrived, because I arrived really, really late and I felt like I didn't want to throw myself into hostel life on literal night one. I just needed to ground myself, have a little bit of privacy, and just make sure that I felt comfortable and safe. So yeah, I landed in Dubrovnik quite late at like 11 p.m. and checked into an Airbnb. I did 2 nights in Dubrovnik. From Dubrovnik, I went to Split, then I got the train into Slovenia, stayed near Lake Bled, went to Ljubljana, which is the capital of Slovenia, and then I went to Vienna, Prague, Poland, Germany, Switzerland, and then I ended in Italy. I did Milan and then went to Venice, and then I flew home from Venice back to London. So I managed to visit 8 countries in 6 weeks, which I will go into in a little bit more detail in a moment. But those were the 8 countries that I went to. So it was Croatia, Slovenia, Austria, the Czech Republic, Poland, Germany, Switzerland, and Italy. It's 8 countries. I honestly had the time of my life. When it came to hostels, I had no clue what I was doing. I had never stayed in a hostel in my entire life. I'd never even been abroad on my own before, but this was really probably my Mount Everest of feeling really anxious. I feel like I was okay with catching flights on my own. I feel like I was okay with being in the country on my own. It was the hostels that I was so nervous about, because again, I think it's just the kind of person that I am, paired with maybe being a female. And I think if you are watching, you are a female, you're gonna kind of relate to that you always have that little voice in your head that's like, am I safe here? Like, checking out my surroundings. I wanted to make sure that I felt really, really safe everywhere that I was staying. For the first few stops of my trip, I had booked ahead my hostels, and best believe I had really done my research on all of these hostels. I'd scoured through reviews, I'd looked at them on Google Maps, I had checked out the photos on the website, checked out photos from other travelers. Like, I was really overthinking it for the first few hostels that I booked, and I was definitely spending a little bit more money just to make sure that I felt comfortable. I was also opting for female only rooms at the beginning. As my confidence grew, I definitely moved away from that and worrying too much about who I was kind of sharing with, which is kind of crazy to say because yeah, as I said, I was really nervous about like, how am I going to go to sleep when I'm in a room full of strangers, or like, will my stuff get stolen? And honestly, I can't speak for everyone because I know there will be people that maybe haven't had the best experience, but for me, I spent 6 weeks interrailing. I must have been to at least 12, 15, maybe 20 hostels, and I honestly felt so safe in every single hostel. My motivation for going on this trip was to build my own confidence, to meet new people, but also to experience new countries and be a tourist and look around and just like soak everything up. So drinking and partying was never part of my agenda or my goals. I was not in the slightest interested in going on nights out. I think I went out for drinks a few times when I made some good friends in the hostels, but like more of a cocktail bar kind of situation, or like going to a pub and sitting down and just having like a drink or two and then going home. Now, it depends on your kind of goals or motivations. Like, if you're going traveling to let your hair down, more power to you, enjoy. But for me, it wasn't really about that. So I was always looking at hostel reviews in terms of what their kind of vibe was, because you can definitely get some great party hostels that looked amazing, that have bars and happy hours, but I actually decided to kind of steer away from those and go for the ones that have more chilled out vibes. I used the app Hostelworld to book all of my hostels, and as I said, I booked those first few while I was at home in the UK before I headed out on my trip. But I wanted to keep some flexibility in my schedule because I didn't want to basically be in a situation where I landed in a city that I loved and then I felt like I hadn't seen everything that I wanted to see, or I made a great group of friends and then I'd have to move on because I'd booked X amount of hostels for the coming weeks. So I decided that I was just gonna keep it kind of unbooked and unplanned. So I was very much getting to a city and then sussing out the vibe, deciding, okay, I think I'm gonna stay here for 3 nights, or I'm gonna stay here for just 1 night, and then I would just book my next hostel like a couple of days in advance. Now, I went in the height of summer, so I was traveling in August and September, so definitely an on-peak season, and I did not have any trouble with finding hostel rooms. The only thing I would say is that when I was booking quite last minute, there wasn't always the female-only option available. So if that's something that's really important to you, just bear that in mind. But I'll be honest with you, I was very much like, there's no way I'm doing like a mixed dorm. There's just no way. I am gonna stick with a female-only dorm, and I'll pay a little bit extra because I just personally felt like maybe that would feel safer. But then when I went to book a hostel quite last minute, there was no female only dorm. I kind of had to just accept the fact that I'd have to stay in a mixed dorm. There was literally no drama. In fact, I kind of preferred it because it was just like a nice mixed bag of people. And yeah, I just, at that point, my confidence had grown. So it wasn't really too much of an issue. But if you are really someone who wouldn't want to share with like a mixed dorm, then maybe just bear that in mind if you are booking last minute. Sometimes there isn't always the female only option. From a personal belongings security point of view, most hostels have lockers, so you can lock away your stuff and know that you are going to be safe, but I would definitely recommend packing a padlock and a key so you can definitely lock your stuff up. I remember when I went to my first hostel, I was very much, every single time I went into my bag to get something, I would unlock it, get my stuff, lock it all back up, secure. By the end of my trip, honestly, I was just like leaving my bag on the floor, because what I found was, yes, of course, there are going to be opportunists, and I would always have my passport on me, my phone on me, anything really important, cash would be locked away. But I don't think you're going to find that when you go traveling and staying in hostels, that people are going to steal like your shoes or your clothes or anything like that. And that was the kind of stuff that I was locking up, literally everything. And then towards the end, I was like, no one is stealing my stuff. Like, if you want my backpack full of dirty laundry that I've been wearing for 5 weeks, like, crack on. What you'll find is that everyone is in the same boat when they're traveling, and most people will be like you. They will be wanting to have a great time and wanting to make friends, and they're not there for any bad reasons or to cause trouble or to make you feel intimidated. So I would just say, have faith in humanity. I know it's really hard these days, but that is what I would suggest. Having a bit of faith in people, and yeah, you can meet some amazing people by staying in hostels. So if you're even on the fence about whether or not to try a hostel or just book your solo trip in hotels or private rooms, then I would say do what makes you feel comfortable, of course. But I think honestly, everyone should give it a go. And if you go for the ones that are not the cheapest hostel, but also not the most expensive, like if you go for the mid-range that don't advertise as a party hostel to kind of dip your toe in, I think you'll find that there are a lot of chilled people that are really kind, and you end up meeting some great friends. I definitely did. So that is what I would recommend on hostels. Now we're going to get on to, I think, the part that everyone kind of wants to know, which is the financial side, budgeting, how much money you should take. And I don't want to disappoint you, but also I can't really sit here and say this is how much money you need to solo travel, because it's going to vary for everyone. But what I would say is that you want to make sure that you can have fun and enjoy yourself, but also if you're going for a longer period of time, having a budget is really important, because it's so easy just to be like, oh yeah, I'll just buy this pastry and this coffee, I'll just go and do this day trip, I'll go and visit this museum. Like, it does all add up, and you don't want to get to the end of your trip and be like, I'm totally out of money and I don't have any disposable income to kind of go and check out these places. Now, I'm obviously talking about traveling as well when you are not employed, because at this point I had quit my full-time job and I was yet to start my business. So any solo trips that I do now as a freelancer, I'm kind of always making money because I take my business with me on the go, or I've got it covered. So I'm kind of in that place now where I have that income. But in this particular trip, I was very much living off my savings. There was nothing coming in, there was just a lot going out. So yeah, I would definitely book your interrail pass ahead of time and make sure that you can get to all of the destinations you want to get to with that pass. I would also suggest making sure that you have a budget for your accommodation, so you're not finding that you're getting to a place and not having enough money to stay anywhere, or getting yourself into a situation where you don't have enough money to stay somewhere that you want to stay and you end up having to stay in places that maybe don't make you feel comfortable, because again, this is meant to be fun, it's meant to be enjoyable. You don't really want to get yourself into that situation. So I would definitely plan ahead for that. And then I would just set a daily budget. Make a little spreadsheet that you can access on your phone or even just in your notes, and just tally up what you're spending each day. Now, every country is different as well. For example, when I went to Poland, I found that things were a lot cheaper than, for example, Switzerland. If you're going to Switzerland, it's beautiful, but be warned, it's so expensive. Different places are going to have different price points for sure, but just do your research before you go and make sure you've got a daily budget in place and really stick to it. For 6 weeks, I probably spent all in, including flights, accommodation, and spending money, I probably spent about £5,000, £5,000. That's going to be different for everyone. It depends what time of year you go as well. I was going in the peak summer, so things were probably a little bit more expensive for me. But that's just my personal experience. It's really going to vary from trip to trip. Alongside this being my first ever hostel experience, this was also my first ever backpacking experience. And again, that was something that I was a bit nervous about, because I am probably someone who, up until that point, hadn't packed very light on holidays. I'd always been the one that's like right up to the threshold of my weight for my luggage, and would worry about, how many pairs of shoes I could fit in my suitcase. So it was very humbling to have to cram 6 weeks worth of clothes essentially into one backpack, which I would carry around on my literal back day in, day out. But what I will say is that get yourself a good backpack. I always looked at those big backpacks and thought, how on earth am I going to be able to carry that weight? But actually they are built to distribute the weight around you. So you've kind of got like a strap around your waist and it sits on your hips, and just trust that a good backpack is gonna have your back quite literally when you're walking around. I would also really suggest packing cubes. They were a lifesaver, because once you have got that big backpack, it is very much like everything's just thrown in. It's so much easier to pull out a packing cube and be like, right, all of my socks are in this packing cube, all of my tops are in here, I've got bikinis in here, underwear, whatever, than it is to literally be like all your clothes, chaos in your backpack. I don't really know how people do that, to be honest. I definitely overpacked on my first trip too. There were certain things that I took that I just did not need. Almost every hostel that I stayed in had laundry facilities, so you can wash your clothes on the go, so you don't need to worry too much about taking loads and loads of clothes, thinking that you're going to have loads of laundry and you want to have different outfit change every day. Whilst on a 1 or 2 week holiday, you might plan a different outfit for every single day. To be honest with you, if you're traveling for longer than 2 weeks, then I would suggest just mixing and matching things and taking basics like a really great pair of shorts that you can wear multiple different tops with, that kind of thing. I would also suggest taking at least one outfit that's warm and waterproof. I kind of got a little bit caught out here because I was going traveling in August and September. I kind of assumed that the whole of Europe would just be gorgeous sunshine for the entire 6 weeks. And for the majority of the time, it was. The majority of the time, it was actually a heat wave and it was super hot, and I was really glad to have all of my summery bits. But when I got to Switzerland, it actually rained a lot and it was really cold in the evenings. So I was glad that I had something to put on that was a bit warm, but I didn't feel like I had the waterproof part down, and luckily I was able to like buy an umbrella. At the end of the day, it's not like you're going to the moon. You're gonna be going to probably big tourist places or cities, and they're all going to have shops and places that you can buy stuff that you've forgotten. So, you know, if you have forgotten a coat, you can probably buy one. I would also say on that note, leave room in your backpack for if you're going to go and buy some new stuff, because there's nothing worse than cramming your backpack full and thinking, okay, like I've got everything that I can physically get in here is in my backpack when I leave to go traveling, and then you have no room to pick up some nice bits that you might see when you're out and about, whether that's souvenirs, whether it's new clothes. And I think it's nice just to have like a little bit of room to add some extra bits. Something underrated that I would suggest packing too is a little lunchbox. So I found that when I was staying in hostels and I wanted to have a slightly cheaper day, or I was going on a day trip and spending my daily budget more on the thing that I was going to do, and I didn't want to spend loads of money going out for literal breakfast, lunch and dinner, I would make food in the hostel. One of the dishes that I made on repeat was pesto pasta. It's so easy. You can just buy a pack of pasta, chuck it in a saucepan, boil some water, and then you've just got like a little jar of pesto. Mix it all together. You can put it in the lunchbox that you have brought with you, and then you can take lunch on the go. That's a really good money saving tip. Most hostels also have like a shelf of kind of free food or up for grabs kind of stuff. So it's where travelers have come along, bought, for example, a big bag of pasta, only used half of it, and then they just leave the other half behind because they're not taking it to their next destination. So you can always either leave your food that you haven't eaten for a fellow traveller, or you can take advantage of that too if you arrive somewhere and you haven't got anything with you. Other things that you might want to pack include sun cream, mosquito spray. If you're anything like me and they are a bit obsessed with you, then that's definitely something you're going to want to take. Plasters, paracetamol, that kind of thing. That's all really helpful stuff to have with you. A reusable water bottle as well, absolutely essential. So those are the kind of things that I packed and found the most useful. Outside of the general what you should pack, finances and places to go kind of advice, I do have some other kind of like niche hacks or things that you should be aware of, particularly if you're going to go interrailing around Europe. So number one is make sure that you check if you need a seat reservation on the particular train that you're catching. Whilst you can buy an interrail pass that does allow you on the majority of trains across Europe, sometimes for certain trains, particularly ones that go from one country to the next and they cross the border, or for like slightly longer trains, you actually require a seat reservation for your ticket to be valid. So that just means that even if you are on the Eurail app, which is what the app is called for interrailing, when you've got a pass, you can select a journey. So for example, say you're going from Berlin to Munich and you have picked the time train and you've got the ticket and everything on your phone, you need to make sure whether or not you need a seat reservation. And sometimes you will actually have to go into the station to buy the seat reservation, like in person, which was quite tricky when I was trying to plan ahead a little bit, because I would find that I wasn't able to buy a seat reservation to us in the actual city, so I could go into the train station in person. But honestly, there's always someone to help, and there are lots of countries and cities that you can actually buy a seat reservation online, which is really, really handy. But yeah, sometimes if you are on a train and you don't have a seat reservation, I believe they can fine you for that. Just check that, because that's something that I didn't really know before I went, and it nearly caught me out a few times. Some very specific female safety travel tips. I would suggest wherever possible on a travel day, making sure that your train arrives in daylight hours. Now I know that's not always possible, and in fact I booked my flight from the UK to Dubrovnik, where I got in at literally like 11:30 at night, which didn't make me feel super great, but that was kind of like my only choice. But wherever possible, I would try and plan my travel days so that I would be arriving within like a reasonable hour and not arriving somewhere in like the middle of the night, because that can feel a little bit daunting when you're trying to navigate a new city and it's dark. And yeah, that's just like my personal preference, but I would suggest doing that if you are traveling alone as a female. I would also suggest just having a few friends or family at home that have your details at all times. So I was constantly texting my mum, telling her exactly where I was staying, which country I was going to be in and when, and I had the Find My Friends app as well, so she could kind of see where I was in the world. I think that's more for peace of mind than anything else, because to be honest, if something happened, she is very far away, but it's just having the knowledge that like someone knows where you are at all times. I also did carry around a little personal alarm, which again, I never had to use, but just especially at night time, to have something on you that makes you feel a little bit safer is going to make you feel so much more confident. And then just the other kind of obvious ones, like, it's sad that I have to say this, but you know, not walking around with headphones in, especially at night. Always knowing how to get back to your hostel, or at least knowing the name of your hostel, because I think as you're traveling around a lot, at the beginning I could have literally told you like the postcode of every hostel that I was staying in, but towards the end I definitely like relaxed into it more, and there were times where I was like, what even is the name of the hostel I'm staying in? And actually that's not very good. So you should make sure that you at the very least know where you're staying, in case your phone runs out of battery or you need some help, and you can at least say to someone, this is where I'm staying, I don't feel safe, please can you help me get back? Or if you're getting into a taxi, you're able to tell them what's what. Always having your phone fully charged and carrying a battery pack as well is completely an essential, especially nowadays. I feel like when you are solo traveling anywhere in the world, everything that you need is kind of on your phone. So yeah, just making sure that you have got enough battery, and if your battery's running low, making sure that you're getting to a point where you can get to charge it up before it runs out, and whether that means not taking any more photos, just being really aware that whilst maybe at home you would be like, oh well, my battery's run out, like you do not want to be in that situation when you are solo traveling. You want to always have your phone fully charged so you are able to make any emergency calls or use your maps. Another really good tip that I would recommend is before you go to your next destination, download the offline map on Apple Maps or whatever phone you use. I actually don't know if you can do it on other phones, but I'm just speaking for myself because I use an iPhone. On Apple Maps, you can select a radius or a place, and you can download the offline map. So you can do it for cities. Probably you can do it for the whole country, but I think that might be slight overkill. But yeah, if you know, for example, you are going to Paris, you can just download the offline map. It will use some data on your phone, but at the end of the day, that's again invaluable. If you come into a situation where you don't have any Wi-Fi or 4G, you will still be able to use your maps. And I think that's actually just a good life hack in general. I actually use that literally here in Cornwall where I live, because it's really annoying when you're out and about and you need to get somewhere and you don't have any signal. But yeah, offline maps, that's a really, really good one to do. Taking the correct plug adapters as well is a really good tip. Now for Europe, it's usually the same everywhere, but I will say if you're going to Switzerland, they have their own special one, so just bear that in mind, because I arrived in Switzerland and I was ready to charge my phone up and I was like, what's going on? My plug adapter for Europe won't fit into their plugs, and luckily there was a really kind guy in my hostel that lent me his charger for the day. But yeah, don't really want to be relying on that for having something as important as your phone charged. If you're a big reader like I am, I think I ended up reading like 10 books on this 6-week trip, which is crazy. I will say that one of the fun things that I really enjoyed was that most hostels have a little book swap section, and it was really fun just to kind of not know what I was going to read next and just have whatever was left in the hostel as my selection. So yeah, I would suggest like maybe taking one book with you, and then you can read that book and then you can just swap it in the hostel book swaps, and I just found that really, really fun. Of course, you can also take a Kindle if you prefer, but obviously you have to remember that you have to keep that charged up. For me personally, nothing beats a physical book, so that's what I ended up doing, just taking one book and then just swapping as I go. And yeah, I ended up reading some really interesting books that maybe I wouldn't have picked myself because it was like the only book on the shelf that was written in English, for example, or something like that. So yeah, definitely get on the book swapping hype if you're a big reader. There's just so much I could talk about on this topic, and if you have any other questions or something that I haven't covered, please leave it in the comments below and I will do my best to answer as many of your questions as you've got. But I guess the final point that I want to make is I think you need to prepare if you're going on a longer trip, for example, like this 6 weeks that I had, where you're away from home, you're away from your family and friends, you're in a different country with different cultures, languages, all that kind of stuff. You're moving around constantly. I just need you to be prepared that there will be down days. And I think that is something that when I experienced it, I was like, oh my God, there's something so wrong with me because I am living my dream. I'm traveling to all these amazing locations. Like, why am I feeling down today? Why do I feel like so lonely? And I was questioning, whether solo travel was for me. But I need you to sit with that feeling and understand that it's so normal. And of course, you're going to be feeling lonely in certain moments because solo travel is so rewarding, but it also is quite isolating. But that's kind of the point. You get to experience these new places on your own terms. You don't have anyone to kind of answer to, but with that comes a bit of fatigue, especially when it comes to decision making, because it's constantly you driving the ship. So you're deciding where you're staying, you're deciding where you're going to eat out, you're deciding what you're going to spend your money on that day, you're deciding who you're going to hang out with. Literally everything is in your kind of control, which is really, really great, but also it can be really tiring and you can end up getting a bit of decision fatigue. You can also end up feeling a little bit isolated and lonely. I think that's really where you need to give yourself grace, because you are not going to have a full 6 weeks of 10 out of 10 days. There are going to be days where you're really tired as well from traveling. You haven't had a great night's sleep in a hostel. You're in a different climate maybe. There's a lot to think about as well. Even if you're used to your own company at home, if you live alone, if you go out on little solo dates by yourself at home, it's very different when you are away on a solo trip because you have to constantly be self-aware at all times. You haven't really got anyone looking out for you like you would if you went with a partner or a friend or a group or your family. You are kind of responsible for your own personal safety as well as your own fun and joy and exploring the new place that you're in. So give yourself a bit of grace and expect that you might feel a little bit wobbly on days, potentially a bit lonely, but I can promise you this, you will also come out of this a stronger person. You will come out of this a more confident version of yourself. I honestly credit this trip for everything good that's happened to me after it, including starting my own business, having this YouTube channel, having confidence speaking on camera, having confidence with new people, joining things like run clubs in my local area now. Like, every part of my life was improved by going solo traveling. And that's not to say that every day was incredible, 10 out of 10. There were days that were quite challenging, and there were days where I was questioning what on earth I was doing. But I promise you, doing things by yourself is a bit of a superpower. That is really why I'm such a big advocate for doing things alone. Even if it's just a weekend away, even if it is just a solo trip to a new area in your local vicinity that you can kind of get on a train and go to a new place and spend the day there. It's not to say that doing things alone should replace doing things with loved ones or friends or family, because human connection is so important. But what I'm talking about is when there is no one to go with, don't let that stop you from living your one precious life and seeing the things and doing the things that you really want to do. If you've made it this far through the video, thank you so much, guys. I really hope that was helpful advice for if you're thinking about planning your first solo trip, or if you're thinking specifically of going to Europe. I will leave all the details of my kind of route that I spoke about earlier in the video in the description below. And please, if you've got any questions whatsoever, pop them in the comments and I would love to answer them. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye, guys.